Louis C.K., before his various nefarious deeds all came to light, he had a great joke about Matt Damon in Good Will Hunting. I won't try to repeat his joke verbatim, but basically he mentioned how pretentious it is for a guy like Matt Damon to write a movie where he is this brilliant, struggling genius. He's so smart and better than everyone else, but he's also sad because he's so smart and so much better than everyone else. And he gets into all these crazy hijinks because he's such a struggling, tough guy. And that's a strange way to look at this film. It's a humorous point, and this is a film that I particularly enjoy, but there is some truth in that joke. Matt Damon wrote this movie where he is the lead character and he gets to make these great jokes like, how do you like them apples? And he wins every fight and everyone's in awe of him. And he's just the coolest guy in the world. And he's so smart, even though he never went to school. He's smarter than all these Harvard guys. And it's a movie that Matt Damon wrote where he is the lead character. I mention this because if Matt Damon is pretentious for writing Good Will Hunting and casting himself as the lead, then The Weeknd in Hurry Up Tomorrow is on a whole other level of pretension with this new film, Hurry Up Tomorrow. Hey everyone, I am Joe from Create Context, and today we are talking about Trey Edward Schultz's new movie, Hurry Up Tomorrow. Music is the hardest form of art to properly critique, in my opinion. I think this is for two reasons. First, music is incredibly iterative. Sure, there have been huge strides in music, and the radio sounds incredibly different today than it did 20, 30, or 50 years ago, but it all builds on itself in a way that few forms of art actually do. A rock band has been two guitar players, a bass player, a drummer, and a singer for decades, even if they sound pretty different now. Electronic and EDM music, they're building off the foundations laid by disco in the 70s and synth pop in the 80s. And rappers still follow the general 16-bar formula that was set decades ago. It's new, but it's very easy to see these influences when looking at newer musical artists. Second, I think this is because music is so closely tied to emotions, maybe more so than any other art form like literature or film. We often discover music, at least our own music, in our adolescence and preteen years. And those songs and artists we love are the artists we'll listen to for the rest of our lives. I love Pearl Jam, but mainly because I first heard Pearl Jam when I was around 12 or 13, when my hormones were running high and I was at the highest emotional level of my life. Those songs spoke to my preteen self in a way that nothing ever had before. I can go back and listen to all the bands that influenced Pearl Jam and appreciate them, but I'll never connect with them the same way because nothing will ever replicate that feeling of the first time I heard Pearl Jam at 12 or 13 years old. Conversely, I can listen to all the bands and artists from today who have been influenced by Pearl Jam, and while I may be able to critique their melodies, lyrics, and technical abilities, it will still never be able to compare to the first time I heard Pearl Jam. All this to say, I'm not a huge fan of The Weeknd and his music. I understand he is incredibly talented. I'm not arguing that. I can see the talent that he has. I just think he has done a lot of interesting things with his music, but things that do not speak to me in the same way as it does for other generations who grew up with his music. And that makes it very hard to critique and look at objectively this new film, Hurry Up Tomorrow, because this is a movie all about The Weeknd and his music. The plot and narrative of Hurry Up Tomorrow is paper thin, and that's not a bad thing. There are episodes of Seinfeld with denser plots in this film, but it basically boils down to The Weeknd, the singer in this twisted kind of real-life semi-autobiographical film about himself. He has some psychological issues that is affecting his voice while he's on tour. One night at a concert, he meets up with a fan, Jenna Ortega, and spends the night after the show with her before quickly trying to abandon her the next morning. It's a proposal that Jenna Ortega does not take very well the next morning. That's the basic gist of the movie, but the actual film is a lot more surreal and dreamlike than that little plot summary would suggest. This film is filled with neon lighted imagery, super quick, almost nausea inducing cuts, and vague sojourns into thin metaphorical spaces. There's a Lynchian vibe to every set piece, but the themes and quality of this movie never come close to reaching the works of David Lynch. The main theme Hurry Up Tomorrow is trying to convey is The Weeknd's inner struggle with himself and, to some extent, his music, what his music is about on a more personal level. This film is almost like an extended music video for his album, with a vague plot and some arguably pretty good performances from great actors. But it never comes off as genuine and instead feels incredibly self-indulgent. The Weeknd is telling us how tortured of an artist he is because his music is so powerful and moving. There's a scene about midway through the film where Abel, The Weeknd, plays Jenna Ortega a demo of a new song he's working on. Ortega's character can't help but hold back tears as she listens to this incredibly vulnerable and moving piece of music. It's a scene that really sums up my feeling for the film and why it's so hard for me to critique it in a non-biased way. I am not moved by The Weeknd's music, and this entire scene feels unabashedly self-indulgent. It's like he's showing us, the audience, how incredible his songs are, how much they move people, but me, I'm not moved at all. Maybe it's because his music isn't for me, or maybe because it happens in a movie that isn't very good, but either way, I found it pretentious and not compelling in the least. If you are a fan of The Weeknd and his music, then this film is 100% for you, in the same way Purple Rain is 100% a movie for me. And that movie is also easily forgettable for anyone who isn't a fan of Prince. Hurry Up Tomorrow feels less like a tangible film and more like an extended reimagining of his latest album. A visualizer, perhaps, for the audio experience, but one with big names like Jenna Ortega and Barry Keoghan. Both of those actors, though, are great in this film. I don't want to take that away from them, though Keoghan is given criminally little to do in the movie. I wish he was in it a lot more than he is. Ortega actually does a great job in her role. It's one that delves into this sort of super fan obsessive character. Think Stephen King's Misery, and I mean really think Misery. There are a lot of correlations between that film and this one. Even with these great performances, though, I just couldn't get into the themes and ideas that are trying to be portrayed on screen. And maybe that's a me problem, and I shouldn't have expected more from this film, but I would say to know going in that Hurry Up Tomorrow is a psychological deep dive into The Weeknd and his music. If that sounds like your bag, then you'll have a great time with this flick. If you are not a huge fan of his music, or even maybe indifferent on it like I am, this movie probably won't hit for you. Thank you guys so much for watching the short weekly movie minute. We'll be back soon. I'm going to do a Final Destination Bloodlines coming up very quick, and then we should be back on a more normal schedule. Thank you guys, everyone, for hanging in there, and I'll see you guys next time.